Have you ever wanted or needed a bag for multi-purpose use, or a bag that you don't need to worry about your important items such as your phone or laptop? Then Knack Bags are the bag for you. Knack Bags are your everyday bag for work, travel, and leisure. Knack Bags come with a fully padded interior to keep your electronics safe. With its sleek design, organized interior, and professional appearance, it looks great at work or on the street and expands for more capacity when you need it.
Get a Knack bag today and stop worrying about how you look when carrying your life essentials. Use the code GAME and for a limited time, get a free TSA-approved lock with purchase. Just add the TSA lock to your cart with your Knack bag of choice and use the code GAME at the checkout to get it for free.
This is Game On, discussing the biggest games and all the latest sports news with Johnny Montalbano and Hank Indictor on the Empty the Bench Podcast Network.
It's showtime, folks. It's episode 8 of Game On, presented by Knack, here on the Empty the Bench Podcast Network. Johnny Montalbano, Hank Indictor, there he is, he's over there, as we get you set for another big week of sports discussion here on the Empty the Bench Podcast Network. Happy May. Hank, welcome. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. My anxiety and my heart rate is through the roof today because of Game 1 of the Stanley Cup Playoffs, but otherwise, I'm doing great. How about yourself, Johnny?
I'm doing great. I'm excited as well, Hank. This is all, when the Stanley Cup Playoffs are always exciting, when your team's in it, it just, like you said, it takes that up another notch, and I'm happy that we're able to talk about it, and at least that'll provide a little bit of a relief before the fun begins later on tonight. But folks, plenty of ways for you to get aboard and discuss what you want to discuss here. You can follow the show up on Twitter at GameOnETB, also Facebook.com/GameOnETB, and our Instagram account, GameOn_ETB. And you can also follow our personal handles right there on the bottom of your screen. So, Hank, as I said, we have a lot to get to, as we always do here on the show, but particularly today, we'll get to the baseball. The Yankees and the Mets beginning May with two of the best records in baseball. The Yankees now with a 10-game winning streak. The Mets 7 series and 7 series wins. Also, we have to talk about all the hit-by pitches that they've been having and them designating Robinson Cano for assignment. Like you said, Stanley Cup playoffs, they started last night with 4 games tonight, including our New York Rangers going up against the Pittsburgh Penguins. And we will have Brian Attard, host of the Sports Box, the Blue Truth. He'll be coming on later on in the show to preview the Pens and the Rangers. So stick around for that. And also a couple other things along the way. But, Hank, we got to get things going here with the football and with the NFL draft that happened this past weekend, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. And, we were both on the air that night. I know you were with the review and preview guys. I was on with Nick, and Tom with the Empty the Bench. We did a little Empty the Bench Game On crossover and saw this first round happen live. And when you look at it, the first 10 picks or so, not really much of a surprise, I would say. It's really when you start getting from 11 down, you had all those crazy trades, which we'll get to in just a moment here. But let's spend a couple seconds here on our Giants, who ended up picking 5 and 7. And I thought there was a few different ways. We were talking about it with Tom Scavetta last week on the show about what the Giants could do. And I have to tell you, after those first 2 picks and 7 picks in, I actually felt pretty good about the Giants. They took Kayvon Thibodeau out of Oregon at number 5, and Evan Neal, the guy I really wanted. They took him at 7, made it a little nerve-wracking. They didn't take him at first, but nevertheless, they did get him at number 7. So those first 2 picks, I got to tell you, with those first 2, I already felt that this was a great draft for the Giants because what they did was address needs, not the best players available. And I think those 2 were 2 of the best that were available for the Giants in that spot. But 7 picks in, and those 2 for the Giants, I have to say, I thought it was a good start for them.
I 100% agree. And it's funny because Tom, if you talk to Tom and I, we both had pretty much the same thing. We both had Evan Neal getting taken 5th and Kayvon Thibodeau going 7th. Turned out it was the exact opposite, but with that having been said, I am completely satisfied with their first round because, look, Kayvon Thibodeau is a guy that if you really look at his talent, I think there are some people that could make the argument that he probably should have been taken maybe a few picks sooner. I mean, look, you don't see edge rushers like that growing on trees. I think he is a big game changer for our defense. So that was absolutely huge. And I'm glad the Giants took him earlier when they had the chance. And as far as Evan Neal goes, Johnny, I got to tell you, when it was announced that the Panthers took Ekwonu, like, I think I was just as excited for that as I was when the Giants took Neal, because at that moment, I think we knew where the Giants were going. And look, I think Evan Neal was the best offensive lineman available for the draft. I think he is definitely going to help what's an already improved offensive line with the free agent acquisitions of Glowinski and Feliciano. But I think he is definitely going to be another piece that they are going to build on with the offensive line. So Joe Shane, again, some people will say, oh, those players kind of fell into his lap. But look, if you live through the Dave Gettleman era like we did, we know that he would have reached and taken Charles Cross. So I am very happy with both of those selections.
You nailed it right there. This draft 2 years ago would if under Dave Gettleman would have been totally different. And I agree with you. You know, after those first two, I already could tell that, you know, Brian Dable and Joe Shane, they knew what they were doing. And it was interesting because I was saying that with Tom, Nick, and Nick on Thursday night, the Giants really also depended on what the Jets were going to do at 4, because we didn't necessarily know what they were going. There were a bunch of players that they were interested in. And like you said, the Panthers at 6 also had a couple of options. You know, were they going to go quarterback, whether it would have been Malik Willis or even Kenny Pickett at 6, considering their quarterback situation. And then when Thibodeau gets taken at 5, there's a little bit of nervous feeling because maybe what if they do go offensive line and Evan Neal is there? But when they took Ekwonu at 6, I was like, all right, so this is it. I mean, you're right. It did help. It did fall right into their lap. But you know what? The Giants took it because, you know what, the year that the Giants drafted Daniel Jones, you know what, the defensive end Josh Allen, which would have been a great guy for the Giants. I mean, both Josh Allens could have been Giants if you look at it, the quarterback and the defensive end. And he fell there, and you would have thought that this is a lock for the Giants to get him. But no, they ended up getting Daniel Jones, and we still know the jury's out on him. But, yeah, no, I agree. This is the first – after 7 picks in, I think you were able to take a nice deep breath as a Giant fan and realize that you addressed 2 big things that you needed. You needed a pass rusher, which they really haven't had since the Super Bowl run, both of them, and obviously help on the offensive line. And now with Evan Neal to go along with Andrew Thomas, now the Giants are actually starting to build some things. And look, this is still going to be a long road ahead for the Giants here. Because, you know, there have been reports that, you know, they may not be able to sign all of these draft picks, and we'll get to the other ones in just a second here. And also they may have to get rid of James Bradbury to save cap space because their cap situation is still unbelievably bad, thanks to Gettleman, really. But I don't know if we can go there like we do with Manfred, but
it kind of works, though. You know, I had to.
You know what? I think if you want me to say this, I think Dave Gettleman was a better GM for the Giants than Rob Manfred is a better commissioner for baseball. If you want me to prove how bad that actually is. But
sadly, I don't disagree with that.
That's how bad really it is. But to be fair, you know, so those 2 picks were very, very good for the Giants. Good old Dave Gettleman. Oh, man. I'm just hoping that you know, we're going to still be talking about him, you know, for another year or so because of the situation the Giants are in. But Brian Dable, Joe Shane, I trust those guys to do what they do. And that really leads me to the Giants in the second round with what they had originally at 36, and then they trade back with the Jets at 38, and then they trade back again. And one guy that I had brought up on the Thursday show with the guys before the round ended, and I was surprised how much he fell, was Nakobe Dean. And I know I had mentioned it on the review and preview live stream that they did on Friday, that to me, Nakobe Dean was there, and I think he was going to be a good fit for the Giants at 36 at the time, and then they trade back, and they end up getting a wide receiver, and that was Wandale Robinson from Kentucky, And that was maybe the first time that, I had a little bit of a question mark with what Brian Daboll and Joe Schoen were doing. But at the same time, I trust those guys. And especially when you look at how far Nakobe Dean fell and then the reports that broke during Friday night about his physical, it might end up working out all right for the Giants.
Yeah, I agree. I wasn't really too keen on the second round pick. I thought taking a wide receiver there was probably questionable, but otherwise, I think Tom and we talked about it on the side. I think we pretty much agreed that Shane really did his job. And look, as I said earlier, I am just thankful that they absolutely nailed the beginning of the draft, because those were the real positions of need right there.
For sure. And really, when you look at the rest of their picks, I mean, the majority of them were line picks, whether offensive or defensive, whether it was Joshua Nzu from North Carolina or, Marcus Mathien from North Carolina. They also get a couple of linebackers, Micah McFadden from Indiana and Darian Beavers from Cincinnati. And we got Cordell Flott in the third round from LSU, a cornerback. Daniel Bellinger, the tight end from San Diego State in round 4. Dane Belton, safety from Iowa in round 4. Defensive tackle DJ Davidson, Arizona State in round 5. Obviously McFadden in round 5. And then Marcus McKeon from North Carolina as well. I have to say, overall, I thought the Giants had a very good draft. Now, obviously, the jury's going to be out if these guys are going to be able to contribute, and it's still going to that you're going to take a couple of years. But what the Giants did was they didn't reach for the most part. They got areas of need. I think them and the Jets, and we'll get to the Jets in just a second here. I think they had a very good draft. And, again, considering the situation that they're in, this is going to take a couple of years, but I feel like this is a good start for the Joe Schoen and Brian Daboll era.
Yes, I completely agree with that. I'm really, really excited to see how it plays out. I'm still not high on the Giants team as a whole. I think it's probably going to be a 5 or 6 win season, but you're definitely going to see some signs of improvement next season. I truly believe that.
I think that's all you can really ask for. I think I agree with you. I think the Giants are a 5-win team. Part of that is, I believe, because the NFC is so bad outside of a couple of teams that they'll by accident get a few extra wins. But you get 5 or 6 wins if the team could be healthy, which is a big if. If you could see some production and also determine where your quarterback situation is going forward here. That's really what you want to get out of next season. It's not going to be a playoff team. I think what you just want to see is some progress heading into really next year off season, when hopefully they'll have some more money to spend and get some guys in here. But yeah, overall, very, very good draft night for the Giants. Now, as far as the Jets go, they were another one that had 2 big first round picks early on at 4 and 10, and they had a couple of ways to go here too. I mean, there have been reports that they had multiple players they were interested in at 4, and then 10 could have been up in the air as well. And at number 4, they end up going with Ahmad Sauce Gardner, who was a guy that I know Tom had talked about with us a lot last week, if he fell to the Giants. But, good start for the Jets getting Gardner, one of the better guys out there in this draft. And then, the 10th pick, that was one that was up in the air for the Jets, because we had heard possibly them being rumored originally a couple of months ago with Tyreek Hill, and even with the wide receiver, the player Deebo Samuel from the 49ers, but they were not interested in parting ways with that 10th pick, and they end up taking wide receiver Garrett Wilson at number 10. And then they do make a big push at the end of the first round. They trade up to the 26th pick to get Jermaine Johnson. And, for a guy that was being rumored to possibly go to the Jets at 4 or even end up in the top 10, to end up moving back up to the late first round and he's still there and get him, I mean, that was an unbelievable first night for the Jets as well. They were one of my big winners along with the Giants.
Yeah, I agree. I think really, if you look at the first half of that Jets draft, getting Sauce Gardner was a win. I think that guy is definitely an NFL caliber starting cornerback. And then the fact that you were able to take advantage of the Jamal Wilson trade and take Garrett Wilson as a wide receiver, I think he probably was the best wide receiver in that draft class. So also W. And then, like you pretty much said, Jermaine Johnson from Florida State. That guy's a baller. The fact that he was still available, huge win. Although, if I'm being honest, as great of a job as Joe Douglas did, let's also not forget that he also very much benefited from the Jamal Adams trade. Because as I said, that's how they were able to get Garrett Wilson.
I mean, that trade is one of the better decisions the Jets have done in a very, very long time. And now you look at the mess that he has out there with the Seahawks and how the Seahawks right now are, probably going through at least a rebuild, if not a restructure, if not a rebuild out there in Seattle. Yeah, the Jets definitely won that trade, and now they, with him as well. And then in the second round, they make a rare trade with the Giants and move up 2 spots to get Breece Hall, and another very, very good pick for them. With Bilal Powell retiring, it gives them another option at running back. So the Jets, what I liked about the Jets here, and I said this on the show before, the Jets are not going for the home run, whether it's not getting Tyreek Hill or even Deebo Samuel, although I think Deebo would have been a better fit for the Jets than Tyreek Hill. I like the fact that they're trying to piece this little by little. And, they've gotten, Braxton Berrios, they've re-signed him. So the Jets are putting some pieces together here to actually to be a pretty good, decent to good team. Their biggest problem they're going to run into this upcoming season is going to be that division because, the Bills are still very good. The Patriots are still going to be, they're not the Patriots of old, obviously, but they're still going to give the Jets some fits. And, the Dolphins are going for it this year with all the moves that they've made. So they're gonna need, health and Zach Wilson now to take the next step. And, he showed signs late in the year last year. So, he's still very, very young, but now this is going to be a lot of pressure on Zach Wilson entering next season too.
Yeah, for sure. He definitely has a better supporting cast now. And I think Jets I would say they did a better job of building around Zach Wilson than they did for, say, Sam Darnold, because I'm looking at this year's draft compared to the 2020 draft. It's night and day what the better draft was.
Yeah.
And this is the same general manager too. So I'm still not 100% sure I want to go up and say Joe Douglas is the savior just because of that one. I think in about a year or two, once they really have the later picks and they get better is when we can really truly judge whether or not he's a good GM. That's kind of I know it's kind of a hot take, but that's just my honest opinion.
That's very fair. They take Jeremy Ruckert, the tight end, in round 3, and then Max.
That one I wasn't too high on. I saw a lot of reports on him saying he wasn't really great.
It's a cool story though because I believe he's a local product. So I think is pretty cool. And then they end up taking Max Mitchell at round 4 and Michael Clemens also in round 4 as well. So I think for both teams locally in the New York area, the Giants and the Jets, they had great drafts because they didn't reach. They drafted smart. They addressed needs. Now we'll just have to see if all those guys will pan out. Obviously, that's going to take a couple of years. But the fact that, they didn't reach for any of these guys, they didn't make any desperate deals. I like the fact that the Giants did trade back a couple of times to get a few extra picks as well because, they're not close. And I like the fact that the Jets didn't go for the home run player that not really would have helped right away. We know the Jets do have a lot of money to spend, but I still don't think Tyreek Hill was a great fit. He's a great player, but not necessarily a great fit. We've spoken about that a lot. Great players don't necessarily mean great fits for organizations. So I like what they're doing, and I think it's going to create at least, a lot. Who knows how long they're going to be in it, both teams, but I think you're going to be interested in both teams throughout this upcoming season because you're going to have a lot of players that you're going to want to watch and a lot of things you're going to want to watch too.
Yeah, no, definitely. I completely agree with that. Didn't really try to go too high for the home run. Didn't really reach. It's all you could really ask for, essentially.
For sure. When you look at the first round, when you're watching that first round happen live, Hank, there weren't really a lot of surprises right at the top. Trayvon Walker went number 1 to Jacksonville, Aiden Hutchinson number 2 to the Lions, Derek Stingley Jr. to the Texans at 3. And then you talked about Ike Inakwu from NC State going to the Panthers at 6. Drake London was the first wide receiver taken by the Falcons at 8. Charles Cross at 9, and then the Jets at 10. But when you looked at the whole first round in general, the one thing I took away from it, and it was something that we had asked Tom last week too, were there going to be any teams that were going to make a push up or was this going to be more of a trade back kind of draft? And really what it was just a trade draft in general. From 10 on, we had 9 trades in the first round, which, we were reacting in real time. It's like, wow. I mean, that's the thing that I took away from the first round that stuck out to me were all these trade ups and trade backs from these teams.
Yeah, no, definitely. So I think it actually set the record for most trades in a draft. No,
in the first round, yes, nine in the first round, and we had a couple to start the second round too. It was like, oh, here we go again. But yeah, I couldn't believe the Saints moving up to 11 from Washington to get Chris Olave from Ohio State. But all these other ones, Minnesota moving, Detroit moving up at 12 to get Jameson Williams from Alabama, which I think that's a guy to watch. They're talking about who's going to be the best wide receiver in this draft, and Jameson Williams to me I think has a chance to be that guy. I mean, he's coming off the torn ACL that he had against Georgia, but I think he's got a chance to be a really good, solid player in the league. But all these wide receivers getting drafted early on too, because of possibly, the wide receiver position being the next big thing to get to being paid. How about Hollywood Brown going to the Cardinals? I mean, unbelievable. That really shocked the world. The Eagles getting a big wide receiver in Brown. Just really, really incredible stuff.
Oh my gosh, the Eagles were one of those teams, and I hate to admit that being a Giant fan, they were one of the teams that did pretty well in the draft. I don't know that they did as well in the later rounds, but for them to get AJ Brown, that was huge. I'm sorry, you said Hollywood Brown. No, that was who the
Hollywood Brown to the yeah, right. Nice. I'm sorry. Hollywood Brown went from got traded from the Ravens to the Cardinals, and then AJ got traded to the Eagles. I was combining both of them there. Yeah.
Yeah, that was a major win for the Eagles. I think AJ Brown is one of the better, and low key, he's one of the better receivers in the league. I'm still not 100% sure that Jalen Hurts should be their starting quarterback long term, but they get Carson Strong, I think, as an undrafted free agent or later on. So who knows whether he's gonna. I don't know what we're gonna see from him, but I would say if we're at least talking about the first half of the draft, then Howie Roseman actually did well. I think it's the later part where he isn't as good.
I'll tell you though, if you're the Eagles, I think you're seeing an opportunity to go for it right now because to me the Cowboys losing Amari Cooper, it's going to be a bit of a hit. They seem to always be there, but I think the Eagles see a sign here to go for it, and I give them a lot of credit. I actually think they might have a good chance to win the NFC East next season. So, and doing what they did, and like we said, all these receivers that are getting drafted because of all the big money now that's being spent on receivers, just part of the craziness in that first round.
Yeah, for sure. I would say probably it's going to be between either them or Washington because we'll see if Carson Wentz can do better in a new change of scenery, although we know what happened in Indianapolis. I'm not really going to press my luck on that.
Well, I mean, he had an all right year, but everybody wants to just talk about that last game against the Jaguars. I think the Commanders can be there for a wild card spot just because, really it's not a reach to say that in the NFC this year, the later, playoff teams are going to be hovering around the 500 mark, if not under 500. Because all the talent's out west, and really when you look at the NFC in general, you've got the Bucks, the Rams, the Packers, and then who's going to be that team that takes that next step. Somebody will, but it'll be something to watch. But overall, your takeaway real quick before we move on here, Hank, of the NFL draft. What was your big takeaway, Larry? Like one thing that stuck out to you?
I think one thing that also stuck out to me was the Chiefs were another team that quietly had a pretty good draft. I think they got better at the wide receiver position. They definitely made up for the loss of Tyreek Hill. So I think that's another good one. And as far as the biggest loser goes, if I may talk about that?
Sure.
I'm going to say that's the New England Patriots. I mean, Cole Strange getting taken in the first round, I think that lives up to his last name, I would say.
I was going to say it sounded.
That's one of those.
Strange.
I mean, look, I've been on record for saying that Bill Belichick lately hasn't been one of the best at drafting over the past few years. This year, now I'm starting to really get concerned about Bill Belichick.
Yeah, no, it's not crazy to say that. It definitely was, a pun intended. It was a strange selection at
Yep.
number 29 for New England, but and that pick was traded multiple times too. Yeah, I just think all the trades that happened, including some of the big name players moving elsewhere, was something that really stuck out to me. We reacted in real time when Hollywood Brown got traded to the Cardinals. We were really like, what are the Ravens doing? And then you find out the news just recently, in fact, yesterday, that DeAndre Hopkins is going to be suspended for the first 6 games of the season because of a positive PED use. And it's like, is that why they ended up getting Brown? Did they know about that when they made the deal? Yeah, the Ravens were a weird team for making that pick, but then at the same time, they ended up with an all right draft. But yeah, this story really came out of nowhere also yesterday with DeAndre Hopkins being suspended for the first 6 games. And part of the reason why maybe they got Hollywood Brown was this. Maybe they knew about it, or also because they're trying to now tend to Kyler Murray as well. So I think that was kind of a strange thing. I still think the Giants and the Jets, and I do think the Eagles had a pretty good draft as well. I think the Eagles are, like I said, are going for the Giants and the Jets drafted smart. But yeah, all that and all the trades in general just made for a crazy night. And I will say, though, the one cool thing also was all those fans being out there in Las Vegas, felt normal. Feels like we're finally getting back to normal in some regard in that. But overall, it was a crazy 3 days of the draft. And now the next thing we got to look forward to, Hank, in the NFL is the schedule release, which will happen in a week and a half on Thursday, the 12th.
Yeah, that'll be fun, and I agree. It was so cool seeing all those fans in Las Vegas, and this was something that I believe was 2 years in the making, because weren't we supposed to be in Vegas during the pandemic year?
I believe you're right, yes. And then I know they're going to Kansas City and then Detroit. I still think, though, and I have to say this because living on Long Island the first 25 years of my life, I still miss Radio City, though. I used to always go to the city the night of the draft and hang out outside and maybe see people and just seeing fans, entering the building. I still do miss
that. Felt like such a good tradition. That felt like such a good tradition too. And then also in years past, I believe they had it at, well, I mean, now it's called the Hulu Theater, but growing up, I remember it being the WAMU Theater, inside Madison Square Garden.
Yeah, that's for sure. But yeah, we'll find out how all these picks turn out. But I think one thing I will go on record as saying here, I think the Giants and the Jets, maybe not record-wise, but team-wise, are going to be relevant this whole entire year. And I think that's really all you can ask for out of these two New York teams. And we'll have plenty of time to spend on them as the weeks and months go on. I mean, before you know it, though, Hank, 3 months and we've got preseason football. I'm not really trying to rush away the summer, but in some ways, I am trying to rush away the summer.
I'd rather let me get through a Rangers Stanley Cup playoff run first before you try to rush into my summer.
Okay, that is fair. And we'll get to the Rangers in just a moment here. We got Brian Attard from the Sports Box coming on in just a moment to discuss them. But another thing that we could be able to talk about this summer, hopefully for a long, long time in a positive way, is New York baseball. And the Mets and the Yankees, entering May with the best records in the league. And let's start with the Yankees here first, because right now they're on a 10-game winning streak. And yes, some of that's against likes of the Orioles and the Royals. But you and I had spoken about this a couple of shows back. These are games that they were not going to win, that they would not win last year. And you look at this team now, 23 games in, a month into the season, and I think that they are actually playing to what I thought they were going to be, and that's a streaky team. And they are that right now, and in a good way. 10-game winning streak. Aaron Judge has been red hot. Giancarlo Stanton's been producing. They've had, Gleyber Torres has even gotten things going. Isaiah Kiner-Falefa. There are players to me that really stick out. Anthony Rizzo's got more home runs so far this season with the Yankees than he did when he came over in the trade last year. And that's part of, I said I love the Rizzo move. I know a lot of people wanted Freeman, but I loved Rizzo, and it's really panning out. But to me, it comes down to a few players, and those players are producing, whether it's been Hicks or even a healthy LeMahieu now, you're starting to see that. This team's a streaky team, but you're starting to see that in a good way here so far.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the big differences right now from what you saw last year is now you're getting more timely hitting because, as you mentioned, I have always considered DJ LeMahieu to be the most important bat of the Yankee lineup. And the reason is quite simple. It's because he's a contact hitter. He doesn't really try to go for the home run. He's a guy that can hit the ball to all fields and drive in runs. And I think that's important. And now that he's healthy, I think that's vital. I think another big thing that's helped is defense. I think now you finally have a guy who actually can play shortstop as opposed to last year where you pretty much had the failed experiment of Gleyber Torres. And I think another thing that's been big is the base running. I mean, do you remember how many outs the Yankees made on the bases like during the first part of last year? A whole game's worth, 27 outs. Like, that's alarming. And there wasn't even a close second, too. I think that's important. And most importantly is the pitching. I mean, Garrett Cole, after that really short start he had against the Detroit Tigers, he's bounced back in a big way. He hasn't given up any runs. I think that's really important. That's something you really want out of your ace. And I think it also helps when you're getting good pitching performances from Severino and Nestor Cortes is another guy who I think is pretty much the X factor of that pitching rotation. A guy who probably can't give you as much length as Garrett Cole, but he's still very much productive. He's getting like a lot of strikeouts. He's not a power pitcher. I really like him a lot. So I'm really enjoying what the Yankees are doing. And look, I'm not going to get too ahead of myself. You're not going to hear me trying to plan a ticker tape parade down the Canyon of Heroes. There's still a whole ways to go. I still think the Yankees will eventually have a little bit of a slide. But you know what? In a long season, I think getting off to this start was important because we talked about this all season. The Yankees are in a tough division. Toronto is lethal. I am not counting them out at all. Even though the Yankees won the first game of that series, I think that was important that they won that game yesterday because today they got to face Manoah, who's one of their better pitchers. So I have a feeling today is when the streak ends. But you know what? I think you have Nestor pitching tomorrow. So I think the Yankees can probably take 2 out of 3. So all things considered, I think they're in good shape. I'm definitely satisfied with their good start so far.
I agree. I think it was very important for them to do that. And also, when you're talking about the pitching front, don't forget about Jordan Montgomery. I mean, the guy.
Oh yeah, Monty's been
he's been phenomenal. He's just not getting any run support. That's why he doesn't have any wins. In fact, I saw a stat this morning, and if I could put my own fun fact into this, I think Montgomery is the first Yankee pitcher since 1968 to have 5 starts under 3 ERA and not have a win.
Figured it had to have been during the CBS era.
Johnny fun fact. Yeah, I'm going to leave that up to Hank because I think he's better at that than I am. But yeah, I just saw it this morning and I had to bring that up. But I agree, the pitching staff and, we were wondering who that second starter was going to be. And now they're starting to show you that they actually do have a capable backup behind Garrett Cole, which always helps. And like you said, Cortez has been brilliant. Even though he doesn't give you a lot of length, he does give you the strikeouts and he gives you a chance to win. Montgomery's been very good. Severino, you're still looking for him to be consistent, but he's giving you a chance as well. Yeah, this whole pitching staff, actually, for the most part, even Jamison Tyone at times has also contributed as well. So that, and then let me get to the offense here, because this was the one thing I thought, there were going to be times where they were going to go off, and there were going to be times where they, cool down. But one thing you've already noticed this year, Hank, compared to last year, is they're making more contact. And that is something that I think is ultra important. Last season they were 6th in baseball in strikeouts. So far this year, they're 15th. Last year they were 23rd in the league in batting average. So far this year, they're 5th. And on the bases, like you said, they're 5th in stolen bases this year. And last year they were 19th.
They're not running themselves out of innings this year, which is definitely a big part.
And you know what? They're hitting a lot of home runs, but if they're doing it with men on base, they lead the majors in home runs, and they've hit a bunch of them during this winning streak. Mm-hmm. But that's the team. So I think, like you said, Falefa's got over 300 average, and he's a contact guy. LeMahieu's been hitting. Those guys, to me, even Aaron Hicks, for as much as the Yankee fans have gotten on him, he's probably been one of the more consistent players this first month of the season. And that's a cool thing to see. But there's going to be a point, and I'm not trying to be damper here. It's really more of a reality check that they're gonna come back to earth here a little bit. If you remember remember last year they had won 13 in a row, and that 13 game winning streak saved them to get into the postseason as a wild card team. So I think there's going to be some point where they do get a reality check, and like you said, they face Alek Manoah tonight, who's always giving them fits. He's a very good young pitcher there up there in Toronto, and he does give the Yankees a lot of problems. But it's a cool thing to see because I feel like them and the Mets were two teams that had to get off to strong starts this year, and they both have. But what you've liked here for the Yankees so far, it's been great. And, now they just really play 500 the rest of the way, then they're going to be fine. And they'll get into at least a wild card spot. But, it's definitely actually, when we were coming on and people were panicking after the Orioles sweep, people were panicking. I'm like, they've done this before, but this has actually been a rare year that they've actually gotten off to a pretty strong start here at 17-6.
By the way, I do want to piggyback off your comments about the people saying, oh, the Yankees are winning all those games because they had a too easy schedule. Look at how many supposedly good teams lost to teams that were pretty bad. Yeah. Red Sox lost 2 out of 3 to the Orioles as well. Mm-hmm. Who was it? It was the Atlanta Braves who lost to the Texas Rangers. Texas Rangers, I know they signed a lot of players signed Semien and Seager to a lot of money, but 8-14 Texas Rangers should not be winning games against the Atlanta Braves. And then you also had the San Francisco Giants getting clobbered by the Washington Nationals. Washington Nationals are 8-16. So in the words of a certain broadcaster we love, well, Susan, you can't predict baseball. And winning these games winning these games against these opponents isn't necessarily as easy as so many people make it out to be. You play the teams that are in front of your schedule. You're doing what you're supposed to do. So that should not be dismissed at all.
Yeah, now you just wonder if they, like we said, now the big key with them now is, are they going to be able to continue this? And I think another thing too here with the Yanks before we move on is they've been healthy for the most part this first month of the season, and I think part of it, you have to be fair here, and it doesn't really get talked about a lot, is you have to give Aaron Boone a lot of credit because maybe this does have to do with the roster construction, is that you can juggle around and he's done this, is you can juggle around the DH pretty much every day, whether you want to give Judge a half a day, Stanton the DH, Donaldson. You could even give, LeMahieu a break, or even Anthony Rizzo, and move some guys around. So, yes, you would like to have these guys, a consistent lineup every day, but you almost have 10 guys for 9 spots here, and that's a good thing to have because then you can juggle around and keep these guys fresh more, especially for a team that, let's be honest, I know every team deals with injuries, but the Yankees seem to be dealing with them more than any other team these past several years. But, knock on wood, first month of the season, they've been relatively healthy.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Usually the Yankees have the worst luck with injuries in April, so I would definitely have to agree with that.
Obviously, still a long season to go here, but definitely a lot of things that you gotta like right out of the bat here. And like I said,
you know what else we didn't even mention? Aaron Judge has been hitting pretty well lately too. He had a bomb in Kansas City, dead center field, probably right underneath the scoreboard, I think. And that was one of 2 home runs he hit in what was a pretty good comeback win over the Royals. So definitely something worth mentioning.
Yeah,
I'm not going to get into the contract talk. That's something we could discuss for a later day. But you have to.
Well, I was going to say, you wonder if maybe that has something to do with it, but no, I agree with you. And I have to say, the day that they took him out and they gave him that day off, I actually was like, you got to be kidding me. This guy's red hot right now. Keep him in the lineup. Don't take him out. But at the same time, like you said, because of all these injury problems the Yankees have had with all these players, and the way the roster is right now, you can juggle around and give guys either a day off or a half a day off. It actually really does work out to them. So it's actually turning out more and more that maybe this roster is constructed all right. I still think they're still too power happy, but if you have guys like LeMahieu and Hicks and Falefa that are constantly making contact, then you got a chance. And even Gleyber Torres, I think, is another big player on this team because if he can give you something, and he has given you some timely hits as well. He hit that walk-off against the Guardians. He had a big hit last night in the 9th inning against Toronto. If he can give you stuff too, then this team really could be set up for a a good run here. And again, I think there's going to be some point they get a reality check, but the signs so far, these first 23 games, you have to really like.
Absolutely. I'm definitely pleased with how they have started. And listen, once the Rangers season ends, I can't wait to be heading out to the Bronx more often than as often as I've done in years past. So it's going to be a lot of fun. And Johnny, if you're ever in New York, you have to join me for one of those games one of these days.
Absolutely. Yeah. I haven't been to New York in over 2 years. Obviously, we know why, because of the pandemic and stuff.
Right.
But every time I try and go back in the summertime and stuff, I always try and make it to a game. Maybe I'll come back and I'll go to that June 5th game Sunday morning at 11:30 against the Tigers. That's Sunday morning baseball.
Oh my gosh, that's gonna
that's that part of that Peacock package that we talked about, and they are part of that too. And yes, the Yankees did have an Apple TV broadcast. We will not get into that because we don't want to rehash the same old story, or the the Prime stuff, because again, same old story. We don't want to really be going down that road again. You know our thoughts about that.
Not going to say it. You know where I'm going with this, but I'm not going to say it.
Nope. Hank, this is positivity today. We've got positive things with the Jets and the Giants. We've had positive things with the Yankees. We're going to get to some positivity with the Mets here in just a second. We got positivity with the Rangers. It's positive game episode 8 here on Game On. And speaking of the Mets, 7 series so far for the Mets in 2022 and 7 series wins for them. What they've been able to start the year off with, again, they were another team to me that had to get off to a fast start, and they definitely have. And I think really you could start right with Buck Showalter and how much he really does make a difference as being the manager. Being a legitimate, capable manager for this team, I think is starting to show, and Buck's been that guy so far.
Oh, definitely. I knew there was no question the Mets got it right when they hired Buck Showalter. When you have a team of a lot of like veterans and guys who are trying to take that next step, you need a manager who pretty much is like old school and like can try to help get them to the next level. So Buck is definitely the right guy, and I love how he pretty much has his players backs too. Like, sometimes it's really the little things with these managers that I feel is pretty important. I mean, I love how he will try to like stick up for them after they get into all those brawls. And then, not to mention, one other thing I want to point out was when Diaz was like struggling early on, like he said, hey, he's got good stuff. I like having him on his team. You need a guy who literally praises like everybody on that roster. In fact, it's one of the reasons why, sorry if I'm going on a little bit of a tangent with the Rangers, one of the reasons why I love Gerard Gallant is he will go out of his way to praise all the little things that even the third and fourth line players in the Rangers do.
For sure. And, I think you've seen that with Edwin Diaz. He looks like the Edwin Diaz that the Mets were hoping they were going to get when they made that trade with Seattle. Francisco Lindor's looked like the Francisco Lindor of his Cleveland days. They've gotten Jeff McNeil has been playing like he was a couple of years ago. Pete Alonso's been great. Dominic Smith. They're getting, again, contributions from everybody, and you got to like that. And you know what? They had some adversity, but they bounced back the next day. They don't have extended losing streaks, and 2 big storylines with them this past week, Hank. Number one, the combined no-hitter on Friday night. An amazing moment. Trevor McGill, who's been fantastic Tyler McGill, I'm sorry. He's been fantastic for the Mets, filling in for Jacob deGrom, and he's been great. And, the bullpen for the most part, and Edwin Diaz as well, so a combined no-hitter nearly 12 years to the day, or 10 years to the day since their first one with Johan Santana. That was a pretty special moment.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And one of the things that really grinds my gears is when people try to dismiss the effect of a no-hitter just because it was multiple pitchers that had done it. That has only happened 17 times in Major League history. And I don't care how many pitchers you use, for anybody to go through a whole game, go through 9 innings, get 27 outs, not give up a hit, that's definitely a very impressive feat. And Mets fans who were there, you got to witness something very special. So that was pretty cool to see, even if obviously I may not be rooting for it to happen for that team. So there you go.
Sure. And, combined no-hitter is still pretty special too, because, these guys facing different pitchers and stuff. I mean, it's still quite remarkable as well. I mean, it was a team. It was a 5-pitcher no-hitter. I think it was the most amount of pitches that was thrown in a no-hitter. It was 159 on Friday night. So a special moment over there at Citi Field. I think it goes to show you that this Mets team is very special and that they are, like I said, they're going to at least be a wild card team. And that's something I've always said. I didn't think they were a 90-win team, but I thought they were still a playoff contender, and I still believe they are. But yeah, no, that was pretty cool. But the other big thing with the Mets, also 2 other storylines real quick with them. Number one, yesterday they designated Robinson Cano for assignment. The right call. There were talks about them possibly sending other players down, and I know I was having this conversation with you and Nick before the season started because we were wondering what Robinson Cano's role with this team was going to be. And my thought was, they were going to give him one more shot because they don't want to necessarily eat the money right away. I actually don't think money is an issue. And you're starting to see that another big difference between the Steve Cohen and Fred Wilpon days is, if a contract does not work out for the Mets, they're going to cut their losses and they're going to move on. And I thought that they were going to give Cano one more shot just to provide some depth for these other players that they have. And, Cano ended up only batting about 190 this season. And I think you've seen that his better days are behind him. And now I will say, I think Cano is going to end up, some team is going to sign him at some point this season, whether it's a playoff or a contender, that's going to be wait to be seen. But I think he's going to find his way to come back to some roster just because somebody's going to, take a shot at him, especially if they only have to pay the veterans minimum for him because he's still owed a decent amount of money here. But you look at it, that was the right call for the Mets. I mean, you cannot send down Dominic Smith. I know he's got options. I know some other players have options, whether it's J.D. Davis or Luis Guillorme. But, Dominic Smith, to me, needs to be as close to an everyday player as possible. And you can do that whether it's DH or left field or at first base when you DH Alonso. And it's definitely the right call here for the Mets. So, kudos to them for doing that and not worrying about the money factor, because I think this would have been something that if it was the Brody days or even the Wilpon days, I think Cano would still have been on this roster in some way. And that just, I think, again, speaks to volumes here to, the changes that we're seeing in New York sports. The Giants with a different administration, the Mets now with a different administration. And it looks like so far it's paying off for them. And the other thing, too, is, and I'll have you also comment on the Cano thing, too. I just want to bring this up real quick before we get to Brian, is all the hit by pitches. We saw the incident with Nolan Arenado out there in St. Louis to end last week. We saw what happened on Sunday Night Baseball with Johan Lopez hitting a player with 2 out in the 9th inning and ended up we found out yesterday that Buck Showalter got suspended for the game Monday night, and Johan Lopez got a 3-game suspension, which I still think was weird because, you didn't eject them. If that was the case, why you didn't eject those guys on the spot Sunday night? But, all these hit by pitches, they're talking about it, possibly the baseball. Good old Rob Manfred, we're talking about the baseball. Oh my gosh. I mean, it's that's
where we trying to, Johnny, I thought we were trying to avoid that. Damn it.
Yeah, no, I know, but I mean the baseball, I mean, come on. I mean, are we really going to be talking about 2 different kinds of baseballs, or now this baseball is, different? I mean, just stick with one. You know what? Don't be changing them mid-season. Don't be going to a new one now. I mean, we're trying to be positive. I'm sorry. We're trying to be positive here. Hank, all the hit by pitches. I'm sorry. We had to find some way to get a Rob Manfred reference in there somewhere. Hank, hit by real quick. The hit by pitches and the Robinson Cano DFA. What are your thoughts on both?
Well, first of all, I do kind of think that the MLB was a little ridiculous in suspending Buck Showalter for the games he did, despite not the whole no warning thing. I don't really want to. I'm going to try not to get too much into that. It's just another example of the Manfred wheel of discipline, which is probably even worse which is probably just as bad as Roger Goodell's, if you ask me. But let me move on to a positive thing, and I'm going to use positivity to talk about the Robbie Cano DFAing. And to me, when I think about Robinson Cano getting DFA'd, I don't really so much think of it as a positive thing for the Mets in trying to get rid of the money and the bad batting average and the whole baggage that he's been carrying around with him and whatnot. I think of it as more of something we should celebrate for guys who benefit. Dominic Smith, like you mentioned, has been doing very well. He got some pretty clutch hits in that win against the Phillies on Sunday night. And I think he definitely earned his stay on the roster. You definitely cannot get rid of him. And I think another player that low key has been benefiting from this that we really should be celebrating for them is Luis Guillorme. I know hitting obviously isn't where his strong point is, but with what he does in the field, I don't think you necessarily, and with who you already have in that lineup, I don't think you necessarily need the batting average out of him. He is definitely a very versatile fielder and someone who I think is definitely a very capable backup to Francisco Lindor playing at shortstop. And especially if you look at his runs that he's saved over the course of the year, I think he's definitely, both of those guys are definitely good to have. And again, if you really look at the Mets and the way they've been, I think you pretty much nailed it on the head. If the Wilpons are still there, one or both of those guys probably would have been gone in favor of Robinson Cano. So I think really, if you look past all the money stuff and the fundamentals, I think it really is the right decision. And it speaks volumes to how much they've changed under the Steve Cohen regime.
Absolutely. It's going to, relevant baseball, that's really all we can ask for in the summer months. And I think with the Yankees and the Mets, we're going to be getting a lot of relevant baseball and a lot of discussion about them as we head over into the summer. And hopefully, Hank, we will have a long conversation regarding the New York Rangers. They begin their Stanley Cup quest tonight against the Pittsburgh Penguins. It's been a magical year for them. 52 wins, 110 points. They've got a Vezina Trophy candidate, possibly a Hart Trophy candidate, a bunch of things. And Brian Attard, host of the Sports Box and the Blue Truth, joined us to preview the Rangers and Penguins series. Well, the Stanley Cup Playoffs started last night, 4 games last night. We got 4 games happening tonight, including, as you can tell, our New York Rangers as they get started against the Pittsburgh Penguins. They're back in the playoffs for the first time since, the 2020 expanded playoff, but really since 2017. And joining us to preview the New York Rangers against the Pittsburgh Penguins is the host of the Sports Box, and that is Brian Attard. Brian, welcome. How are you?
Living the dream, guys. How are you?
We're doing great. Thank you so much for joining us. And you host the Blue Truth part of the Sports Box, right? The Ranger.
Yes. One of the many hats that I wear as part of the Sports Box network. So I have my normal Tuesday night show is Highly Opinionated with my partner, Mike. We do a variety of NFL stuff. But my pet project is Blue Truth, talking all Rangers all the time, which, you get on there for an hour and it feels like 10 minutes, which is what this is going to feel like, I'm sure. So this is the best time of the year, guys. And we're back. We are back in the postseason for the first time in years. And it's exciting.
Yeah. And I was going to start with that. I was like, when you entered this season, first year coach Gerard Gallant, what are your really expectations as the season starts compared to now entering the postseason?
I thought they were a playoff team from the jump. I thought the last couple of years, if you go back to the COVID shortened year, the year where they got in from the qualifying round, which isn't really the playoffs, but whatever. Yeah. Had that gone on, they probably get in on their own. Not like they probably get in, right? And then last year, I think that they would have been a playoff team in a normal schedule. So they were very much like a finesse type team last season. Obviously, they went to more grit, and that's well documented. But when you kept playing the same teams over and over again, it was nuclear war for months. The Rangers weren't really built for that. If you played last year's team with a normal schedule, they probably sneak into the playoffs. But then again, this year you see where they are, and the youth playing massive roles. And then this, Hank will know this. They play the song at the end of games at the Garden, and there's a line in there that says, "We'll build it better than we did before. We are the people we've been waiting for." And really, it fits this team to a T. Like, you look at the storyline arc of the letter and the sell-off and the trades and everything else, and how everybody just bought into that. Like, there wasn't anyone who said, "Oh, this is not going to work." And look, ping pong balls make great general managers. Thank God for that. But everything you could have asked for, they are ahead of schedule by anybody's definition of where they thought they would be by now. No, I thought they'd be a playoff team, like a wild card team out in the first round, and I would have been perfectly fine with that. I had no expectations from that. But I mean, look at the way the season has gone, and here you are. Now you kind of think, well, what is the road to get there? Have they? To me, they've exceeded expectations to this point. I think that those expectations have to change now with the case that you're in.
Yeah, for sure. Go ahead, Hank.
So, yeah, I think one of the things, I know we talked about this a lot, like during the season, whether it be us in person at the Garden or whether you had me as a guest on Blue Truth. Thank you for that, by the way. That was a lot of fun. So I think
it's all on this side of the table.
I appreciate it. So one of the things we discussed was like they were a talented team, but we all like thought that they could have done more. And we both pretty much agreed that Igor like carried the team. What do you think about the trades like during the deadline? Do you think that really changed the team? Because let me tell you right now, I thought the Rangers were pretty much a different team after that deadline.
Well, what happens is you put actual NHL talent in your bottom six, and all of a sudden things look better. And what I loved about what they did at the deadline is, look, they didn't move anybody who was irreplaceable. They didn't move their first round pick. There was all this talk of, would they try to trade Kravtsov when his value was low? Would they move on from Nils Lundqvist, who didn't really pan out this year? Would they trade their one? They didn't really do any of that. The most they gave up was 2 2s for Andrew Kopp. That's worked out tremendously. Really just under the radar type stuff, right? So you had like the teams like Florida really like mortgaging their future to try to make a run right now. I think Drury knows where this team was. Like, this is not their best iteration. That's still coming. So yeah, I mean, look, you owe it to your boys to like do what you can to try to give them the best shot. I don't think look, he took a lot of flack for the Buchnevich trade, and rightfully so. I mean, I think that was done because they don't want to risk losing him for nothing, the way they might lose Ryan Strome for nothing now. And they couldn't trade him at this deadline because then what are you telling your team? So I understand why that deal was made. Didn't agree with it then, don't agree with it now. Dead issue. What they did at the deadline was very low-risk type stuff, low-cost type stuff. Frank Vetrano for a fourth. I mean, everything that they've done has worked swimmingly. Give the guy credit. He had the pulse of his team at the deadline, and he gave them the pieces that they needed. And they do like a completely different team from that point on. The analytics, for those of you who care, I know some don't, whatever, have been tremendously different after that. Like, it's not the same. Yes, look, Shesterkin's important. I'm not going to apologize for having the Vezina winner in net. I've been part of this movie before since the mid-2000s. I know what it's like. But they defend much better. Their structure is much better. They have better 5-on-5 numbers. It's a different team. So a lot of the criticisms that they relied so much on Igor, which were true in the first half of the year, they haven't had to as much. Some of that might be who they've played, but you don't make your schedule. Again, a lot of the questions have been answered. Now it's, can you do it in the playoffs?
Yeah, absolutely. And, Chris Kreider having a career year with 52 goals. Artemi Panarin with 96 points. I mean, all the big guys. I mean, we talk about even Mika Zibanejad. He's been there as well. So, I think one of the words you used with this team, and I think you brought it up too, is depth. Frank Vetrano they brought in as a depth piece, and he's been fantastic since he's gotten here. So they can go 3-4 lines deep. They can go 2-3 pairings deep. So, it really is. It really seems like, wow, this has been a magical year. This actually also seems like a year where they really could go make a deep run.
I think it depends how it breaks. I'm sure we're going to talk about the series that they're in. Assuming they get through that, depending what happens in Boston and Carolina, if things break right, they could find themselves in the conference finals again. And that's, if you think of this team and you compare it spot for spot to the 12 team and the 14 team and the 15 team, those teams that were set up to make those long runs. If the goaltending is roughly the same, and Hank Lundqvist, not Hank Indictor.
Yeah, no, of course.
Says that like Igor is more his technique is better than Hank's. Oh, thank you. I'll take your word on it. From a talent perspective, this Ranger team this year is way better than those teams. I mean, those teams, I remember that in 12, if they were down 1-0, the game was over. Like, you didn't think they were going to be able to score goals. That is not a problem this team has with their offensive firepower. So, again, the expectations change, and I think that it's going to be really interesting to see how they do now that the pressure is on. It's not regular season hockey anymore.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think it's been amazing what they've gotten in the second half. And one of the other things that's been a strong point this year was the power play. Was probably near the top of the league. Obviously, it tailed off a little bit in the second half. I think that could probably be a big difference in those playoff games now.
So here's the, not to jump into the series, but here's the thing, right? They've lived and died on their power play for most of the year, right? So they've been lethal. I mean, again, a ton of talent that you can put out there. Kreider he's become Adam Graves 2.0 in front of the net. It's wonderful to see. It's exactly like you get those shades of 94 sometimes, like Adam Fox being a Brian Leach clone in many, many ways, if you remember him playing. And there you go. And you see that, right? So the problem is you live and die by the sword. My biggest fear going into the postseason is you're not going to get the calls you got in March and February and January in May. So if you have to rely on your man advantage to score and you don't get that many chances to, now you have to be able to get goals elsewhere. And I think that their 5-on-5 play is really, again, since the deadline has gotten much, much better, that needs to translate, or they will not make any sort of a run. They might be, on the outs very early.
Yeah. Talking with Brian Attard, host of the Sports Box here on Game On. Brian, so let's dive into this Rangers-Pens series. And, we were discussing a lot, what would be a better matchup for the Rangers if it's the Penguins or the Capitals. But you look at this Penguins team and, obviously when you think of the Penguins, the first names you think of are Sidney Crosby, Evgeny Malkin, Chris Letang. But, one of the first, like the thing that I zone in on in this series right now as a start is the goaltending matchup. We talked about obviously Shesterkin, who's probably going to be a Vezina winner. I mean, you can even make the case he could even be a Hart Trophy winner with how great he's been this year. But when you look at the Penguins here, they're dealing with an injury to their starting. It looks like Casey DeSmith is going to be starting instead of Tristan Jarry for at least the first 2 games, they're saying. So when you look at the goaltending matchup, and what do you think about that as part of this series upcoming starting later tonight?
So if you remember, when the last time these two teams played in the playoffs was 2016, and a goalie by the name of Jeff Zatkoff started games 1 and 2 for Pittsburgh, and the Rangers split those games. They ended up losing the series in 5, which I kind of thought they would. They weren't really the team that year. Look, it's an epic mismatch in goal, but it's one that the Rangers need to exploit, right? So you're going to get elite level goaltending from your goaltender. We know this. That's what he is. He will win the Vezina. He should win the Hart. And in a year where you don't have a 60-goal scorer in the mecca of hockey in Canada, he probably does. But it is what it is. Not going to be too concerned there. They have the advantage there. But that's where that 5-on-5 scoring has to come from. So you have to, if they're going to get that advantage, at least in the first 2 games. And look, Jarry was rather awful in the playoffs last year. I mean, you could really make the case he was the reason that Pittsburgh lost to the Islanders, especially that overtime gaff. And I think it was game 5. So it's not as if you're going up against, Ken Dryden when he's playing, but again, it is an advantage. It's not their guy. The same way Boston's playing against Antti Raanta, Carolina's backup. You have to make them pay for that. Use that advantage while you can, because if, let's say, you split the first 2 games, they get Jarry back, they get some momentum from that, it could easily go the other way. But at the same time, DeSmith's not a bad goaltender, not Tristan Jarry's numbers, but again, you have to make them pay. It's not nobody's fault somebody got hurt, but it is what it is.
Yeah, no, I agree, especially given our track record against backup goalies. I mean,
and that's another thing. I
think it's either McCaff or the guys at Blue Shirt Underground who say you can bring a random guy from Penn Station underground can go play backup.
The emergency backup goalie.
Yeah, exactly. No, that's always given me nightmares over the years. But I think one of the big things that that the series will probably come down to, I agree with you 100%, is the goaltending, because oftentimes, and I think I probably left a few comments like that on your show.
Sure.
Usually playoff series are low scoring games. And ultimately at the end of the day, if you're going to win low scoring game, that would have to be the guy in front of the net. Igor Shesterkin. No,
absolutely. I mean, we talk about how good their penalty kill is. He is their penalty kill. Okay. Let's not mince words here. We have this advantage. I'm not going to apologize for having the best goalie in the world at the moment. My biggest concern here is that, again, we talk about the Rangers' power play being such a strength of the team, what they rely on to get a lot of their offensive pressure. Pittsburgh is the second least penalized team in the game.
Yes.
With the number 1 penalty kill. Now, is that a chicken or the egg type thing? Like, is your PK actually that good, or do you just not get enough calls on you to make it a weakness?
Right.
Crosby and Malkin have been, criticized as crybabies and this and that for as long, since the cavemen roamed the earth. So this is not anything new. That's probably your biggest fear as a Ranger fan. Because again, like I said, it works both ways. It's a great strength, but when it's your main strength and it doesn't work, you're in trouble. So to me, that's the series in a nutshell. If the Rangers can get 5-on-5 scoring, especially from the middle six, this could be a short series. If they are too reliant on their upper end, that when they get those 5 guys out on their power play, which again, lethal, it cannot be your only source of offense. Yes, make them pay when they take a penalty, but you can't sit there and wait for a call against a team that doesn't. It's not that they don't take penalties. It's for whatever reason the NHL doesn't choose to call penalties on the Pittsburgh Penguins. So it is what it is. You know it going in, so be aware of it.
Yeah, I can already hear the fix your skirt Sydney chants at down here.
He's just phenomenal player. Like,
there's no question.
One of the all-time greats on the ice. I don't, no friend.
The thing is with the Penguins also, as we talked to Brian Attard here on the show, look besides Crosby, Malkin, and Letang. I mean, who else are you really looking at on the Penguins side to really be a factor?
Jay Gensel, bar none. Mm-hmm. Jay Gensel's a 40-goal scorer. There's so many weird storylines to this series. It's very much the ghost of Christmas past versus the ghost of Christmas future, in that this might be the last gasp for the Penguins as we know them. So again, Malkin's 34. He's going to be UFA in the summer. Time catch up to everybody. Crosby's got a couple of years left. Letang's been through the wars. They've changed goaltenders, Fleury to Murray to now, this group. Like, at some point you can't keep band-aiding a gunshot. Like, they're going to eventually have to let it go and bleed out and, do what the Rangers did.
The Rangers did. Exactly.
Which worked for the Rangers, right? So whereas the Rangers are ahead of schedule, Pittsburgh might actually just be kind of running on fumes here. Look, both of these teams have not won a playoff series in the past 3 years. Okay. Pittsburgh's actually made it the past 3 years, haven't got out of the first round. Mm-hmm. The Rangers have been in a full-fledged rebuild. So the results have been the same for the most part. That's pressure on Sydney. That's pressure on that team. Like, they're not going to come in and just die. It is the matchup Rangers fans wanted. I mean, we all we're talking for weeks into this. Like, do you really want to jump Carolina? Because then you might play Tampa Bay or Boston. Would you rather just play Pittsburgh? And you've owned Pittsburgh. I mean, they've played 4 games. They've won 3 of them. The one they lost 1-0. So it's not as if at no point has Pittsburgh dominated this team. The Rangers have been the better team for the most part. It's the matchup that you want. But if I'm afraid of anybody, it is Jay Gensel. Again, a 40-goal scorer, led that team in goals this year. A guy nobody talks about because you're always talking about the Crosbys and the Malkins and the guys that, are the headline names in Pittsburgh. That kid is very, very good. He could be an X factor because, again, if they're too focused on the big names, he will make you pay, especially on the power play. And they will get their chances on the power play.
I think the only other name that I would even fear, if only because he's a former Ranger, is Brian Boyle. But then again, that's him and Jeff Carter. Like, they've been there, done that before, but they're really not guys I fear as much as, say, a Crosby or, like you said, a young 40-year-old or young 40-goal scorer named Gensel. So
yeah, Brian Boyle on that team is of no consequence.
No. But you've also seen what ex-Rangers do.
That's fair. So you're right on there. I don't know if he's kind of the same ilk, but I hear you on that one.
I'm sorry, Brian, but I can be a bit of a worrywart at times.
Listen, I say this all the time. The playoffs are not fun for me. It is pure stress and pure nausea until it's over. So I get it. I am always looking for what is going to go wrong. We are Rangers fans. We are conditioned to expect that. So again, the games, it's not enjoyment. I'm literally wanting to throw up for 3 hours. Like, that's what I do.
It's enjoyment.
It is what it is, and I can't help the way I'm wired. So
yeah, no, I mean, it's a lot of it's a great feeling though to actually be in it. I say since really the lockout, if you take out the last couple of years, the Rangers have actually been probably one of the most consistent teams in all of hockey. If you really think about it, they've been in it just about every year except the last couple when they've been rebuilding. And Hank had brought this up too on one of our shows. It's like it's very rare for a team to go from one Vezina goaltender to possibly another one, and that's what the Rangers did here. Luck or whatever, but
like the 49ers going from Montana to Young and the Packers going from Farber Rogers.
Yeah, I mean, it's you don't see it that often, even in hockey for sure. But so with a few hours to go before face-off, Brian, so after you factor all this in, what do you think your prediction for the series?
Look, they're the heavy. I know the betting odds are very, very even. I think I read a stat with MGM that like 95% of the money is on the Rangers. That scares the daylights out of me because that is not good. Like that means, does the public have it wrong? The public tends to have it wrong a lot, and that is giving me some pause here. But again, this is the matchup that everybody wanted because they played this team very well in the regular season. Now, having said all that, we all remember in 1994, the Rangers were 6-0 against the Devils in the regular season. Come playoff time, it took double overtime of the 7th game to squeak through. So that is not, one is not a harbinger of the other, but this is probably the best matchup they could have asked for. I think, the irony is, as star-studded as Pittsburgh has been throughout the last 15 years, call it, I would say the Rangers have more stars right now. And it's a very different place than the team was just a couple of years ago. Full credit to John Davidson, Jeff Gorton, who are no longer here, and Chris Drury, who is. Again, they've added a ridiculous ton of talent to this team, and it's in a much, much better place than they found it. And that's the comparison to those 13, 14, 15 teams that had that rock solid goaltender, which they have again, but they didn't have the offensive jump that this team does. I think it's a good matchup. I think they win the series in 5 or 6 games. I lean 6 because something always goes stupid in the playoffs. You lose a game you have no business losing. They could get it done in 5, and it wouldn't really surprise me. But again, if they cannot score at 5-on-5, it could easily go the other way. And I think that they need game 1 more than Pittsburgh needs game 1. I think that they need to take the bull. You don't want it. It is a young team for the most part. I mean, it's still led by true legitimate NHL star players that are 29, 30 years old. But if you lose game 1, I think doubt starts to creep in a bit, especially because you've pretty much owned this team all year. Rangers win game 1, I feel very good about that. Pittsburgh's still a very proud team, not going to lay down and die. 6 is probably it. I really hate picking teams to win the series on the road, but whatever. It's 5 or 6 for me. And again, if not, I also then put myself, if it gets to a 7th game in the Garden, am I really going to pick either Jari or DeSmith, whoever's playing, over Igor in a must-win game? Is that the homer in me talking? Yeah, maybe, but I just don't see that. Like, I would take Hank Lundqvist in a 7th game against anybody. So Igor's getting there, and again, he's not done it in the postseason. Has had a chance to. This is his shot. I think they win the series in no more than 6 games. If it gets to 7, I think they have the advantage. If they end up losing, I'll be disappointed. But again, they're ahead of schedule, so you really can't be. Again, better days are still on the horizon. So like I tell Ranger fans, you can't always live and die in the moment. I know it's hard and it sucks, but if they don't get through the series, it's going to be okay. If they do and things break right, they could find themselves relatively deep. Again, they have the goaltending. The Rangers have gotten further with worse skaters and a good goaltender. So we've seen this movie before.
Yeah,
it might be a sequel. So again, I'm not going to say there's going to be a Canyon Heroes parade this year, but I mean, everything's going right. I mean, can you really be upset no matter what happens here with this team? I mean, they shouldn't be this good this quickly. They shouldn't.
Totally. Absolutely.
Yeah, no, 100%. I'll take it. And trying to remember what the other thing I was going to say. Well, oh, right. Yeah, no, I wanted to piggyback off what you said about the young players. So I was texting with one of my friends like a couple hours before we went live. Like, he was telling me that, like, if there was one thing he was nervous about, it was a lot of these young players not having the experience, which, and by the way, I don't disagree with him entirely. I think he makes a good point, but I countered with him by telling him, hey, I actually think that could be used to their advantage because a lot of these guys don't really know what it's like to play in a playoff. Like, they're going to be like young, hungry, and eager to compete. So I think really it should be interesting to see one way or the other. What's your take on this, Brian?
Very much a why not us type team. Again, it's the youth is there, but it's weird though. I mean, everybody says, "Oh, look at the young Rangers." Look at the top scorers on the team. It's Artemi Panarin and Chris Kreider and Mika Zibanejad. These are not 21, 22, 23-year-old kids, right? So, yes, Adam Fox is an absolute stud, and he's 23, 24. And then Keandre Miller was just an unbelievable breakout season in so many ways. I mean, and you're still kind of waiting for the best version of Lafreniere and Kakko. So it's like, it's not, they're a young team, but they're not entirely like led the way.
Yeah.
David Quinn mentioned this on a podcast. He was on Cam and Strick a couple of months ago, talking about, Lafreniere and Kakko, because it was always, they're going to be busts, that, and the third. And he said something to the effect of, usually teams that pick high in the draft stink. So those players come in, they immediately get top 6 minutes and power play time and all that opportunity that you can't do. You can't give Kakko and Lafreniere top 6 time when you have a Zibanejad and a Kreider and a Strome and a Panarin. These teams don't get top picks. So there's always this talk of, are these guys bust because they're not doing what Austin Matthews did and what Connor McDavid did and what Jack Hughes is even doing across the river. And again, I think it's unfair to expect that given the opportunity that they're given. I mean, Lafreniere finished with 19 goals. I think he got 1 in the power play. So they're okay. So I hear what you're saying is, youth and inexperience sometimes works in your favor. You don't know better. You don't know that you're not supposed to be, leading a charge to the conference final, whatever. You're just playing hockey. So it cuts both ways. I mean, like I said, if this doesn't end well and it ends short, it's not going to be the end of the world. It's going to be disappointing in the short term, but you get over it. It is experience for the kids. But at the same time, they have a really nice mix. Like, I think you have elite young talent, elite age-appropriate talent, defense, depth, goaltending, very much a complete team. And, as much as I fought this whole, you need grit, this, that, and a third, they didn't go out there and fill their bottom 6 full of guys like Ryan Reeves. You can have one, that's okay. Barclay Goodrow has actually been an invaluable addition. And I was wrong then on him. I didn't like the contract. I didn't like anything about it. It's worked out so far. There's 5 more years to go. We'll see where that ends up. But again, they have their leadership. They have their group. So they may not have a captain, but they might have like 6 of them. So it's okay. I'm not worried about their quote unquote inexperience. I think that's not going to be a factor. Like I said, I think where that might come in is if you go down in a series, how do you react? That might be the storyline from a youth perspective.
A little adversity. Let's see how that all works out. Well, we will find out. They get started in just a few hours, and hopefully they will have a deep run. And like you said, if they even get swept, I think this has been a very successful season for sure. And I think they're set up for a very, very long time. Brian Attard, host of the Sports Box, the Blue Truth, on there as well, joining us here on the show today. Brian, thanks so much for joining us. And, hopefully if the Rangers do have a deep run, we'll have you back on and hopefully talk to you in late May or early June.
I would love to have that conversation.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, thanks so much for joining us today, Brian. We appreciate it. Okay. And again, our thanks to Brian Attard, host of the Sports Box and Blue Truth, joining us as well. Hank, before we go here, a couple of moments of ourselves. I know you're going to game 1 later on tonight, so we'll try and get you out of here real soon so you get you ready for that. Mm-hmm. I know you're a little nervous. You're excited, all the emotions, which are understandably so. When you look at, like I asked Brian, your thoughts entering the season to where you are now, and you look at the series in general, what are you thinking as face-off is just a few hours away?
So I think the Rangers are definitely the better team. I mean, offensively, I think the Penguins definitely can match up with them. I mean, you still have to worry about Sidney Crosby, and even though he's on a bit of a decline, I would say of Evgeny Malkin. And as we alluded to, Jake Gensel with his 40 goals is quietly one of the guys. I think he might be the guy I'm more scared of than Crosby, to be honest with you. But otherwise, defensively and goalie-wise, I think the Rangers have the edge. And I'm going to give you my prediction right about now. I say the Rangers should win this series in about 5 or 6. And even if you get to game 7, if Igor Shesterkin is healthy and starting that game, I'm really not as worried. I think the Rangers should definitely be winning this series.
Yeah, I got Rangers. Yep, yeah, absolutely. That's fine. I got Rangers in 5, Hank. I really think the goaltending thing is a big deal here. Obviously, Tristan Jarry's going to be out there saying at least the first 2 games. They're going with the Smith as backup. Now, sometimes, like we even said with Brian, these other guys, they come in here. I think of the Montreal goaltender that they faced a couple of years ago. He came in and, played great. The Rangers ended up ultimately winning that series.
You're talking about Tokarski?
Yes, Dustin Tokarski. Yep. I just remember how well he played. I remember the St. Louis goal in that series in overtime. and how he actually gave the Rangers a lot of fits and for somebody that wasn't really known. But I agree. I think the goaltending thing is a big deal. I think it's obviously a big advantage for the Rangers. We've spoken about too. I just think the Rangers have a better team overall. Sid still scares me a little bit. I think he's going to have a goal or two in this series. I think it's just natural because that's just who he is. Mm-hmm. But I think the Rangers just have more depth, top to bottom, and defensively as well. I think the Penguins will get a game in this series, but I really do think this is going to go 5 and that the Rangers are going to get out of it. But the Stanley Cup playoffs, they're hard to predict. I mean, it's going to be exciting. I mean, we could definitely see some upsets along the way. I just don't see it in this one. I think the Rangers get past the Penguins in 5, and I think we're going to come in next week and we're both going to be pretty happy.
Yeah, with everything you just said, I agree. And I think another thing that I want to mention that like Brian and I kind of talked about is the Rangers have pretty much been a different team since that trade deadline. Andrew Kopp and Frank Petrano have definitely helped to give them more depth at those lines. And if you look at the Rangers Penguins, unlike other teams that they could have played, the Rangers played the Penguins most of those games after the deadline. So the Penguins have pretty much already gotten a glimpse of what the Rangers can do with the way they look right about now. So I think that's another thing that really needs to be factored in. But nonetheless, I completely agree with you there.
Absolutely. It should be fun, should be exciting, should be nerve-wracking. But you know what? That's the Stanley Cup playoffs, and there's no really better feeling, especially a playoff game at the world's most famous arena. And it's gonna be a blast. And again, from where this team was a couple of years ago, rebuilding, I know they were in that bubble in 2020, but it's been almost 5 years to the day since the Rangers were last in the Stanley Cup playoffs. And this team has changed a lot. And I think another thing too is Gerard Gallant. I mean, I don't think it can really be underestimated how much of an impact he's had. And again,
absolutely.
I'm sorry, just 1 second. I just want to say that I think that this also speaks to what the whole show's been about. Different administrations, different head coaches or managers making a big impact, and I think Gerard Gallant's been another one of those. So I think that's going to help too, and the depth that this team has. And Brian had said this too. This could be a few years in the making that they can have deep runs like this, just because they don't have to worry about paying these guys just yet. Mm-hmm. But ultimately, in the end, I do think that the Rangers in 5 here against the Penguins. What were you going to say real quick?
Okay, so one more thing I really want to say about the Rangers before we wrap up. I just want you to remember where you were and what you were thinking when that letter was released in about like the week or so leading up to the trade deadline. It basically said they were going to blow it up after all those deep runs that they had with that core. And I remember feeling that, sad because I knew the Rangers pretty much had wasted their shot of getting Henrik Lundqvist a cup. But ultimately, I knew then, and I am just as confident now that they have done the right thing. And I still think as great of a job as Chris Drury has done this year, and make no mistake, he has done an excellent job, roster-wise, other than maybe the Pavel Buchnevich trade. I think they probably could have done better there. But you know what? No GM is going to be perfect with all of his trades. I think you still have to give a little bit of credit to Jeff Gordon, even though obviously he got fired. And I know he's kind of been a flawed GM, and I know he kind of lucked out with the drafts. He still brought in Artemi Panarin. And yes, you can say what you want about him taking less money. He still traded for Adam Fox, who, again, you could say what you want about him kind of forcing his way to the Rangers. And also, let's not forget, he traded for Mika Zibanejad. He made some other moves that have led to the depth. So I think him and John Davidson are other guys that you need to think about for why the Rangers have the wheels set in motion to be a really good team in years to come. And to piggyback off what you said about Gerard Gallant, I think obviously, you can say that David Quinn kind of was on the short end of the stick, but if you really look at how that locker room was won, he was obviously not the right coach. I think you needed a guy who is a veteran like Gerard Gallant, and he knows how to get the best of his players. And as I kind of mentioned earlier, when we talked about Buck Showalter, if you look at his press conferences, he is a guy that knows how to deal with the New York media, and he knows that what he has with his team, and he goes out of his way to pretty much praise literally every single player on his roster. I don't think it can really be understated how great of a job Gerard Gallant has done. So I completely agree with you right there. And I'm really looking forward to seeing what the Rangers can do and what noise they can make in probably the first step of this new window.
Absolutely. It's going to be a lot of fun. Hank, have a great time at MSG tonight and in Game 2. And it's going to be a blast. I mean, I'm looking forward to talking some more about the Rangers on episode 9. We'll also get into the NBA playoffs a lot next week as well. I mean, we just had so much. We even got the Kentucky Derby happening on Saturday. There's just so much happening in the sports world. This is a great time of the year, and it's great to be a part of it. And that puts a wrap on episode number 8 of Game On. We'll be at episode number 9 next week. Hank, great job as always. Thanks again. Just also a quick programming note, folks. Hank and I will be joining Nick Morganson on episode 133 of Empty the Bench this Saturday at 3 p.m. Eastern here on the Empty the Bench podcast network. So we're looking forward to filling in for Nick Federa and Tom Albano. So you can tune in for that. And, of course, we'll be back for episode 9 next week. We are presented by Knack Bags. Make sure you can go use the code GAME at checkout. You can get a free TSA-approved lock for a limited time. Make sure you put that lock in your checkout and use the code GAME, G-A-M-E, right there. See on the bottom of your screen. You get a free Knack TSA-approved lock with your order for a limited time. For Hank Indictor, I'm Johnny Montalbano. This has been Game On, presented by Knack on the Empty the Bench podcast network. Let's go Rangers, and we'll see you next week.